And we're live. In the greatest rift in the Anglo-American alliance since World War II, Boris Johnson warns against taking hydroxychloroquine, even as Donald Trump says he is taking the unproven drug. It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, 4:00 p.m. We are starting an hour early today. And the reason that we are starting an hour early today is that our guest is joining us from Copenhagen. And so it's 4 p.m. US time, 10 p.m., I guess, Copenhagen time. Kate, we have some murder hornet news, I think.
The murder hornet news is that Kentucky bee experts are going to great lengths, apparently, to protect the communities of bees and the colonies of bees in Kentucky from impending murder hornets. To which I responded to you when we found out this news that they are better at protecting their bees from murder hornets, which may or may not ever appear, than they have been from protecting their citizens from coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to point out there are no murder hornets anywhere near Kentucky.
Yes.
But it is good that the Kentucky public health authorities are onto this. I just want to say a lot more cases of coronavirus in Kentucky.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, yay,
Whoa.
We can hear you. Hey, Eric.
Hi, sorry about that.
We are not allowed to have fun anymore, but in lieu of fun, we have Eric Landon joining us from Copenhagen with some clay and a spinning wheel. Eric Landon, welcome to In Lieu of Fun.
Oh, thanks for having me. Just to make sure, you guys can see the wheel spinning, right?
Yeah, it's perfect. The framing is perfect. You nailed it.
Right. But I can't see you guys.
Really? You can't see us?
No, for some reason, it's just saying it's waiting.
Oh, well, that's bizarre. But we can see you perfectly.
Well,
and great, your framing of this is perfect. Before you get started, let me just kind of introduce you. So you are a wildly popular potter and ceramicist.
You're too nice.
And your work is actually, I'm completely obsessed with your work. I feel like it's a very platonic ideal, honestly, of a lot of pottery. It's very it's huge. It's like dramatic. You do very nice, fine work. It's just gorgeous. And you have like 1 million followers on Instagram. And you're based in Copenhagen. And until recently, you traveled all over the world giving workshops, which is how kind of I came to find you when my partner took one of your workshops in Brooklyn. And as you're going to kind of demonstrate, it's no wonder that you have such a following, because you have this, you just are like incredibly good at doing these large scale vessels. And I've shown up with a small piece of clay. I feel like I'm gonna let you guys down. Oh God, I wasn't like planning for you to spend, a ton of time, but I don't know. Are you comfortable like talking to us while you're throwing?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things I have to take a pause for example, when I'm pulling the clay up, but in between kind of sequences, of course, I can, take questions and chat with you guys.
Great. Awesome.
So as always, if you have questions, ping us in the Q&A, flag us what questions you want, and we will rapture you in. Eric, the floor is yours.
Yeah, right, Tell us about how you kind of how you got from Milwaukee to Copenhagen.
Okay, well, it's the typical love refugee story. Well, I just graduated from Xavier University in Cincinnati, and I was traveling around Europe, and I was traveling in Portugal, and I met a Dane. We fell in love. It's now my ex-wife. We have a wonderful 18-year-old together. And I moved to Denmark in '99, and I started doing pottery in high school back in Milwaukee. But I took a break, for my economic studies, moved to Denmark, and then I applied to the Danish School of Design And then I got in. I don't know how. I didn't speak the language. I couldn't draw a straight line. But I could do something that few other people could do at the time, which was make something on a wheel. Back then, so much focus was put on design and less on craftsmanship. And one of the heads of the department was actually an American. And he thought, why not, give this kid a go? So that was my introduction to the more professional ceramics environment in Denmark. So I've been living in Denmark for 20 years and working as a professional more or less for 13 years.
Cool.
And what is
actually, I'm going to get started here. Actually, this is the stuff that I can do without,
Okay, great.
So just keep talking.
So what is the studio that you have in Copenhagen? Tell us about it.
Well, I worked as an artist in clay for a couple of years, and I had a small studio and was making mostly artworks and doing some pretty cool exhibitions, installations around the world. And then I decided, you know what? I didn't actually start doing this to make installations and, fine art. I actually just wanted to make pots at the end of the day. So, I'd been living on grant money from the National Art Foundation for a couple of years. And then one year I didn't get any grant money. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I'm going to make a living doing this. So I decided to come back and make vessels again and focus on the wheel. And started a small brand called Tortoise. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. And decided after a couple of years that I was kind of fed up with working with retail, because I was working with retailers all over the world. I was working with retailers in 18 countries and some of the best. But then my business overheated a little bit, and I was spending all of my time being productive and producing, and didn't have any time to be creative. And then I started on Instagram to see if I couldn't change that a little bit. And then things just kind of happened organically. People, of course, interested in the vessels, but they were also interested in maybe learning how to do this themselves. And I hadn't even considered teaching at the time. Then I'll fast forward 5-6 years, and now I have, of course, my own production in my own studio. We have another studio with 25 wheels where we have students coming from all over the world to learn how to do this. And then, of course, I travel quite a bit. We just finished a tour of South America, Brazil, and Argentina. So I spent, of course, a bit of my time in the studio doing my own work, but I spent a lot of time with my students. And I think teaching and working as a craftsman, they really complement each other nicely, because teaching, I really have to understand my techniques a lot deeper to explain to my students. And some of the insights that I get from teaching, I apply those back to my work. So I found a really interesting way to use business to diversify my business, to finance my creativity, and give me the room to do my work at a pace that I want to.
Can I ask, just out of curiosity, when you say that you were spending all of your time filling orders during kind of the more retail start of Tortoise, what does that mean? Like, how many pots can you possibly throw, or how much can you possibly do in a day?
Well, more than I was wanting to. I mean, I called our studio Tortoise. I'm kind of like a tortoise, like a turtle, because this is a slow craft, and suddenly my business, I think things were going way too quickly. But I was producing, hundreds of vessels. Sometimes I was producing 200 vessels in a month, which for me is a lot, because I really want to produce a high quality product. And that's kind of one of the decisions a lot of small studios have to make this day. Well, how exactly do you sell your work? Retail is a good way in the beginning, but it can kind of suffocate your creativity, because of course, the retailer has to make money. That's understandable, because they have rent to pay. But it means often you become a little bit of a slave to your production. Now I make only the things that I really want to make. And in a way, I've been able to maintain the integrity of what I do, because I'm a creative person. I'm not just a productive person.
What's the difference between a creative person and a productive person? I mean,
Oh,
most people are actually neither, in the sense they, no, I don't mean that in a
okay,
disparaging way,
of course,
but I mean
that
like,
depends on,
but I
it
mean
depends
like,
on how you're, I'm sorry, I'm talking
people
over you.
don't either produce, imagine new vessels, nor do they produce them. So when you're saying you're a creative person, not just a productive person, a lot of people don't actually distinguish between the two of them. So walk us through that distinction.
Well, in the old days, I had designs. I had 16 designs that I produced, and I had, retailers that would pick a certain vessel in a certain color, and the creativity had already happened in the design. And everything I did was purely production and being productive. These days, everything that I make comes out of, it's just curiosity. What happens if, two vessels that I make in my studio, I combine these together? It's kind of a game. It's a different kind of productivity, of course. I'm extremely productive, but I'm productive in a much more creative way. I started doing ceramics because I really enjoy it, and I enjoy, investigating and experimenting and trying things out. And 8 years ago, I didn't have time for that.
Yeah. So I'm also kind of curious, there's a real mix between kind of the craft community and the ceramics community and the fine arts community. I feel like there's always, maybe I'm wrong about this and you can correct me, but I feel like there's been a tension to have pottery not seen just as craft, or like fine arts looks down its nose at kind of craft or things like that. And I'm just curious. I mean, and I think the like artists like you, Brother Thomas, other types of like really, really tremendous kind of ceramicists go a long way towards like kind of blowing up that distinction. Is that something that you like are interested in, or like the communities, like the difference between the communities?
Well, it's been beautiful to see, the status of ceramics kind of blow up in the last, especially the last 10 years. And a lot of it has to do with social media. One of the things that us craftspeople do is, we don't just do our craft, we also live our craft. And we have extremely compelling stories. I don't like, putting things in boxes. I mean, what I do is both, it's design, it's craft, it's art, it's photography, it's video. I think often the people that are most successful these days are the ones that are able to cross all of these boundaries. It's one of the reasons I have such a big audience. I think on Instagram, I found ways to merge audiences, people interested in architecture, people interested in just cool looking stuff, satisfying with craftspeople. There's a lot of playing going on these days, and there aren't actually any rules, which is kind of cool. And that's because crafts, art, creativity has become a lot more democratized. We have, people opening up studios after doing ceramics for a year, and suddenly they have wild success on social media because they have their own way of doing it. It's nice to see these rules loosening up. It's nice to see people trying things out and breaking a lot of these barriers. Of course, ceramics has had this boom and exposure. Of course, everything is kind of cyclical. You never know how long that's going to last. But the cool thing about ceramics is it's always found its relevance. In the old days, it was purely functional, ritual, and then art, and then design, and now kind of lifestyle. This evolution just it's just fun to be a part of. Yeah. But I'm not the kind of person that will define, what is art, what is craft, these kinds of things, because I think the most interesting things exist in all of those areas.
Yeah.
And what is the role that Instagram has played for you? I mean, you have a amazing high number of Instagram followers. I'm not on Instagram in any significant way, so it's not an ecosystem that I really understand. But when you've mentioned it now several times, for you, what's the role that Instagram plays in your daily work product?
And like, how
Well,
is that translated economically for you?
Well, I can touch on a couple things. Of course, I mean, there's the whole commercial aspect, monetizing on your creativity. I have access to a much broader audience. I in a way make a niche product. It's pottery, but given the fact that we have access to the entire internet, I have access to this niche all over the world. So in the old days, I'd be dependent on my local gallerist, the local demand. These days, I'm even as a small player, I can rely on global demand, which also drives my prices up. I mean, not that everything has to do with status and pricing, but that allows me also to keep the level of my production down to a point where I think it's enjoyable and where I can be creative with each vessel that I make. So that's where kind of the business, commercial things, and the creativity, they can actually go together quite well. But in terms of my life, being a potter can be kind of a solitary existence. But Instagram has filled my life with so many interesting people. Also because it's allowed me to diversify and create other businesses, which allow me to, do the workshops and travel. So a lot of people think, Instagram is a superficial thing. It's not true relationships, not true friendships, but I've forged some amazing relationships over social media. And in terms of creativity, there's a lot of possibilities on Instagram. And now, there's TikTok, which is also a new format for media, to try out new ways of expressing this craft that has been done for, thousands of years. Suddenly we have a format where I can show the making. I can, extract from the process a beautiful act of, for example, closing the top of a vessel or just manipulating clay. These acts in and of themselves become objects. And of course, they have also the whole viral possibility as well. So it's really interesting. It's a whole new playground for craftspeople to try new things out. So it's changed everything for not only for my business, but also for me as a creative. In the old days, I was also very hands-off with, my creativity and the things that I wanted to make. But now I listen to my audience. And when I've heard 100 times, you need to do that vessel in that glaze, I know maybe it's an interesting one to do. So I also try to have fun with it as well.
So what's the
I don't know
mix?
if that answers your question, huh?
What's the mix of your business at this point? Are you like, what percentage is making and selling vessels? What percentage is traveling around the world, demonstrating and lecturing and teaching? What percentage is other stuff? Like, how are you, what's the mix of stuff that you do to sort of fund your life as a scholar and a craftsman and an artist?
Well, I'd say, let me get ready with done with this poll here.
I'm actually completely transfixed.
Yeah, the concept that you're casually having this conversation while doing what you're doing is really mesmerizing.
Well, well, thanks. I mean, of course, I have a lot of practice, but this is also part of my job. I mean, I do travel, and I do demos in front of large groups, and I've become a little bit of an ambassador for my craft. And it comes with the territory. I have to, carry out dialogues while I'm working. But the things I will not do, I will not talk while I'm, for example, pulling. But what percentage of my business is what? Well, that depends on, the time of the year. During the summer, the workshops really take over. In the beginning, if you asked me if I wanted to have, a tourist business, I would have said, no, you're crazy. I'm an artist. I don't want to be, in the tourist business. But I do have a business which fringes on tourism because we have so many students coming from around the world. So that dominates my summers. Falls slow down, and that's when I get my own work done. Winter, we travel. because the winters here are miserable. It's really dark in Denmark in January, February. So there's a good balance for me, when I'm doing one thing to focus fully on that. And when I'm doing my work, I have several weeks where I focus primarily on my work. But I'd say it's probably 40% ceramics and 60% other things. And back in the days of, where there's a lot of money, and I think there was still money in influencer marketing, but I also did partnerships. That was also a really nice source of income as well. But I don't do that anymore. I think it takes a little bit away from the time I want to use being creative.
I kind of love everything that you're saying, because it reminds me of some of the things that, as a person who studies the dark and the light sides of the internet, this is like finding you and like finding artists like you. There's a few others. I'm really a fan of Poena Studios in LA. Like there's like a few other ceramicists that I'm really into. And like finding them was this amazing gift for me. Like I was like, I didn't know how happy a mug could make me, or a vase. And like, it just brings joy to my day every day. And now I like have them. And without that, like, I've sought out and supported them and like buy their art. And I just feel, I think it's been a great thing for people who want to enjoy and appreciate art.
Well, yeah. Now, Instagram has become the media for ceramics and for crafts, but it makes sense because it allows us to tell the story that we want to tell about our process and about our life. In the old days, I was dependent on editorial for everything. A magazine doing an article, newspaper doing an article, but they always had the story that they wanted to tell. Now we can tell the story that we want to tell. It's beautiful in a way, and but it's also, as I said before, Instagram has really democratized a lot, also in the crafts, because now normal people have a say in what is good and what is bad ceramics. In the old days, it was only the experts,
the gatekeepers.
And
yes.
How different is that?
Huh?
How different is that? What the Instagram audience?
I think it has its positives, in that, because at the end of the day, we are making our work for the people. We're not necessarily making it just for the gallerists and the experts. But I still think that there are some experts that still have a little bit of knowledge about what we can expect from ceramics. I think it's missing a little bit. It's as if a lot of the older generation almost dismisses Instagram. It's a language maybe they don't quite understand. It's a little bit, of course, intimidating for the more established ceramicists. So it'd be interesting to see the generation a little bit older than me also participate on social media to really get out the best in ceramics. Because often it's the most catchy, it's the most colorful, it's the most funky ceramics that gets the most likes and the most views. But often it's the most subtle, it's the most meditative ceramics that are the most beautiful, and also, in my opinion, the most sustainable, because these are things that you will probably value for the rest of your life. So it has its positives. There's some tensions in the crafts right now, because normal people have almost, in some people's opinion, too much to say. And I tell you, there's a fellow that went viral recently, and I've talked with this guy on Skype. His name is Dex, and he got really big on TikTok, doing these funky videos where he's just kind of like flirting with the camera, and he's getting millions and millions of views on these videos. And it's really awesome. He's been able to activate a young audience that wouldn't really find pottery interesting. But at the same time, he's getting huge number of views and likes. And I think some of the best ceramics still goes a little bit unseen. So it's be interesting to see how social media figures itself out when it comes to the way that ceramics and crafts kind of promotes itself in the future, and the way that we define ourselves. Are we high quality, or are we kind of like funky in the moment ceramics? It's nice to have both. But Instagram has had such a huge impact on people's what people think ceramics is. Yeah. Now I often have somebody asking me, why don't I make flower pots? Why don't I make plates? These kinds of things. I'm a specialist. I mostly make vessels and I make vases. So I'm also dealing with an audience that doesn't understand some of the nuances in ceramics and some of the very professional kind of arguments or discussions that we have. It's an interesting meeting of these two different worlds. Yeah. Sometimes I have to bite my lip a little bit when I, get a smug comment on Instagram. But it's interesting times. I'll just put it that way.
We have a question from Matt Lane. Matt, unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, yeah, I work in IP policy, but I also love to do pottery just as a hobby. And I've been fascinated by how potters are very open and sharing with their techniques when it comes to making vessels, and they'll teach you everything they know. But there are also some things that they guard as secrets, like their glazing techniques and other things. And I was wondering if you had any opinion or sort of what kind of things do you find useful to share and learn from other people, and what kind of things do you try to keep secret?
Great.
Well, it's funny. I have my speaker in right now, and I hear Donald Trump in the background, so I'm going to turn that off. Sorry, the CNN just came on my speaker.
No, it
really disrupted me for a second.
No, we scheduled in lieu of fun originally every day to coincide with the president's coronavirus briefing because it's a way of drowning it out.
All right, so there you have it.
The 55th episode, and I have not watched a single one of the president's coronavirus briefings. And so having it actually physically turned off during the show is symbolic of everything.
Well, I'm glad I could do that for you. This with your knowledge in ceramics, you have different traditions in ceramics. American tradition and the American ceramics community is extremely generous with their knowledge. They share recipes, glaze recipes, techniques. Europeans are a little bit different. And if you go over to Asia, they're extremely secretive about a lot of these things. I share, but there's certain things I won't share. For example, I think if I have developed a glaze, for me, it's an invention. And I should be able to take advantage of that invention for a little while and then eventually give it off. But I give that off to my apprentices. Yeah. And this is like a motivation for people that train in my studio to really put in a good effort. Some people think I'm stingy because I don't do videos about how I, glaze my things. I'm sorry, I'm really taking my time here. It's difficult for me to talk and throw at the same time.
No, you're doing amazing. And also, I just want to say that you have a few videos of you glazing. I've seen a bunch of them.
That you see me, really?
I thought, I saw a video of you basically dunking. Maybe I'm just completely.
Yeah, that's a skimmed down version. I share a lot, I spend a lot of time, generating really cool content for my audience. And for me, that is, that's enough. But I think it's amazing that people do share because there's a lot of communities. There's a lot of, I know a lot of glass blowers, people from other crafts that aren't as open with their knowledge. So I have a difficult time answering that question. I do share a lot, but not always over social media and not on websites or platforms.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'm kind of fascinated by the democratization that you talked about in the ceramics community. Obviously, artists used to kind of rely on patrons to fund their work. Now we have Patron or however you pronounce Patreon or however you pronounce Yeah. And Instagram and Etsy and all of these ways of kind of going direct without the retail or galleryist. Is there, yeah, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, you're describing like some, like having apprentices, like is a very almost guild or like kind of like a protect, like a way of, I don't know, just a way of protecting the art that is still somewhat untouched, it seems like.
Well, it's kind of that is my responsibility. I mean, I have responsibility to my craft that people can, or young people can learn how to do this. Because one day I will, get hit by a car and, or I won't be here
Hopefully
forever.
not.
I won't be here forever, and I have to give that knowledge away. I mean, it's in my interest to have, of course, it's an interest of everybody that people are making pottery in 100 years. Now, in the last 10, 15 years, and this has happened everywhere, not so much in the US because the schools are, a lot of them are private. A lot of the ceramics departments have been closing down in Europe. We live in a socialistic country, which is beautiful. But when the government has to make decisions about how the money is spent and the culture ministry, gives money to the design school, and maybe there's a little bit of cut in funding, they have to decide what goes, the fashion or the ceramics. And ceramics, for some reason, it's like the schools are always 10 years behind the trend. And they already started to close the schools down 10, 15 years ago, or the departments. And now there's all these opportunities, for ceramics, and there's nowhere to learn it. So it's a responsibility for studios like mine to kind of pick up the slack a little bit and give, young people the opportunity to learn this craft, because they're not going to learn it anywhere else. And my apprentices, they contribute to the bottom line of my studio because they help with the teaching. They help with, simple types of production. So it makes sense also from an economics standpoint, from a financial standpoint. But it's a big responsibility.
I want to ask about a different relationship. You've alluded several times to the fact that you're participating in a craft that has been going on for thousands of years. I have spent a lot of time over the years at archaeological digs, particularly in the Middle East. And, pottery shards are the bread and butter of archaeology. And
Yeah.
when you go to these sites, you run your hands through the dirt, and there are, you just pick them up, and sometimes they're in these piles of discards that are, very large. And they're so ordinary and so unimportant and uninformative, or duplicatively informative from the archaeologist's point of view, that they don't even retain them. They just throw them in these piles. And they are exquisite. I have been known to remove them from these piles and carry them home in my pockets in violation of local law at times. And I'm always amazed that these are discards, right? These are things that archaeologists find so uninteresting that they're, from their point of view, garbage. And from my point of view, they are somebody doing what you're doing now, right?
Yeah.
Except at a time when the craft was the essential element of home life, right? This was what we stored things in. This is what we carried things in. This is what we poured things from. And so my question is, you are an artist and an artisan at a time when the craft is inessential to our existence as a civilization.
Yeah.
But there was time, and it wasn't that long ago when the craft was, really important to our civilization. And so, what's your relationship with the gazillion nameless, probably impoverished people who did what you're doing when it wasn't an art? It was a staple of their sort of exquisite work, was a sort of staple of life. And I'm just interested in how you interact emotionally with them.
Well, you still find that today. I mean, I've been to Central and South America. You find villages where people are doing this just to survive. And this is, they're not doing this for status. They're doing this because this is what they've always done. And it's extremely humbling. I feel to a certain extent, this kind of imposter. I'm sorry, I live in, my English is a little bit bad sometimes. I've been living in Denmark way too long. I'm living a craft that isn't really necessary because we have plastics and we have other materials. And I've recently been confronted with this coronavirus, and the world has more, important things to think about than ceramics and crafts. And I've really struggled, being commercial in this time, because this is not what people need. They need, to be safe. Ceramics has kind of taken a little bit of a back seat in terms of importance to a lot of bigger things. But I feel because this is a physical craft, I mean, we're dealing with the same things: physics, centrifugal force, gravity, these kinds of things, same sensations in the hands, a lot of the same techniques. And you can see videos of people that are throwing with techniques that existed for hundreds of years. It's the same thing. I feel that I want to master my craft as almost homage to some of these people, because I'm able to maybe give it a little bit of a status it hasn't had in the past. And in the beginning, people used to ask me, how do you define yourself? Are you a craftsman? Are you a designer? Are you an artist? And I always call myself first and foremost a potter, because there's something extremely human about it. There's something so raw and basic about this. And I think it's interesting that I'm experiencing some of the same things that have been experienced, 200, or hundreds or if not thousands of years ago. I mean, there's been technological advances. The wheels are non-mechanical. We use a pedal and a motor in the wheel. So I can do things now that were not possible, hundreds, even decades ago. But I feel like ceramics is living through me, and hopefully onto my apprentices in the future and onto their apprentices. So I feel like I'm, part of a living kind of like a tradition. Now, I didn't grow up making ceramics. I mean, I don't have a family that does this. And I traveled to Asia a couple times for ceramics exhibitions, and I always meet the Japanese ceramicists, and they ask me, so what generation are you in your family? Are you, you're like what, fourth, fifth generation in your family? Because I know potters that have been, their 8th, 9th generation that's been doing this, and their family history, heritage is living through the hands of these craftspeople. And the moment they stop doing the craft, it's almost as if their family dies. Yeah, I don't have that pressure because we don't have a history for this in my family. But given the fact that I've been exposed to so many amazing traditions for ceramics, I feel a responsibility to show this from the best perspective. Now, I think only a ceramicist can understand or a potter, or it can be an enthusiast, can understand there's something really magical about this. There's something, there's some kind of, these objects that we make, they have a soul that an industrial process could never make. So So I feel like I'm a little bit rambling here, but I feel like even though I'm not directly, I'm not a direct descendant of any specific tradition, I still feel like I'm a part of a world ceramics family. That of course goes back thousands of years.
Yeah, Eric, that's actually really beautiful, especially kind of in a time when, I don't know, that must be a grounding feeling, frankly, like to be able to be in touch with that kind of longevity and that kind of perspective in a time when literally time has no meaning. I regularly forget what day it is when I wake up, or remind myself and then forget later in the afternoon. Things just seem to be totally ungrounded at the moment. So,
Well, listen, these Corona times, we call them Corona times in Denmark. In the beginning, I actually struggled finding motivation a little bit, because we started our lockdown a bit, before the US, and I couldn't go to the studio, and I was a little bit down what I'm going to do, so nobody's interested in ceramics. They're interested in the crisis. And then I realized that people need this. People need to check out. People need to go on Instagram or go somewhere, and they need a distraction. And
yeah.
I've been, what's my role as a potter? Well, yes, it's to make beautiful objects, but the most beautiful part of my job, or the most rewarding thing, is when I receive a message from a mother whose son, suffers from some kind of hyperactivity disorder, and he gets transfixed when he sees my videos. People are bonding through watching my videos together. You have ceramic studios that put my videos up on the screen and watch them while they're working together. So the ceramics become a little bit of a social glue, but it also has a lot of really great therapeutic things, not just as a maker, but also for the people that are enjoying it. So after the kind of, what am I going to do now, this crisis? People were like, start making again. We really want to see you make. We really need you now. Yeah. So my role has changed a little bit from the production to the creating nice therapeutic things for people to watch. But that's fine with me.
That's really cool.
I mean, I just think this is so great. It's just kind of just been such a joy to talk to you. And this has just been amazing. And we've kind of talked a lot about how Instagram has shaped your brand and your path, and like, not just Instagram, but all of social media. But like, I think that the other side of this, and we can talk about this if you want to kind of, I think we're kind of having a nice moment of talking about all of the beautiful things that like art and everything else put into the world. But there's also, so we don't have to go down this road, but like, I'm just kind of curious. I know that you've gone through like a lot of attack on social media. About 2 years ago, you went through this phase that was pretty difficult, where you had someone who kind of who leveled a lot of allegations that were not true against you. And it was in the midst of the Me Too movement. And it just kind of like ended up being, and we talk about this in the show a lot, kind of the trolls of the internet and the danger of social media mobs to shame people and everything else. I don't know if like that has fueled your creative energy in the last 2 years, if it's like, it feels like if it devastated you, how you kind of rose up out of that. Like, what was that like?
Well, we've gone through a couple of years of, a lot of success, and I think actually 4 days prior to this happening, Instagram had posted one of my videos for like the third time, and my Instagram numbers were on the rise, and we're just really enjoying this nice momentum that we have. And I just came back from a workshop in Bali, and everything was great. And then came these allegations, which are false. And of course the internet, exploded in my face. I've had to, of course, come to terms with, why people reacted the way they did to the story. Also try to figure out, is it me that people don't like? Is it just the moment, this Me Too thing? A lot of like soul searching, it's been an extremely educational experience. But in the beginning, of course, our first reaction, when I say us, I mean me and my partner, was to, go on the defense and say this didn't happen. And we realized that soon it really wasn't the time for that, because the world wasn't ready to accept maybe that women are not always telling the truth. And I don't want to get into that whole discussion there, but we had just canceled a tour to the US. We had sold, over $100,000 in workshops, touring 10 different cities. And when this happened, all of the workshops were canceled. And it happened only a week before I was supposed to go to the US. Suddenly I had 3 months where I had nothing to do. And of course, when something like that happens, of course comes, I was depressed and I couldn't sleep. It was a horrible experience. But I thought, you know what? I have 3 months here now. I'm going to try to make the most of it and prove to the people that have stayed loyal to us that I'm worth following, and keep them, behind us. And so I went back to the studio. This is the most productive months of my career. I also had to prove to myself that I was worth people's time. So I tried to turn into something positive. Now I have it my advantage that I'm the owner of my studio, and I could go to my studio, the week after this happened. And there's a lot of people with careers, work for, companies, have practices, who lose their careers immediately. So to a certain extent, I'm lucky in that regard. But yeah, we've kind of made it through this. And from the outside, it looks like, to most people, and I hear this all the time, looks like you got through this unscathed, because we have more followers than we had before, and we do the tours, and we have a pretty successful business that people keep coming to the studio. But the psychological, emotional toll of it, you guys have maybe read about, or know somebody who's experienced this. It's hard, and these are things that I will have to work through probably for years to come. But it's nice to have our business intact, but it's been damaging in other ways.
Yeah, I actually think it's great that you're talking about it. Ben and I both know people who have gone through similar things for various types of reasons, things they actually did do, or that were blown out of proportion by media mobs or social media mobs, and things that they didn't. And all I will say is that you're telling your story is something that will resonate with other people who also feel like this moment of people just don't understand how utterly devastating it is at a personal level to a day-to-day person's life, of kind of this level and type of shame is just something that we need to raise, I think, more awareness about, in getting people to be smarter about how what they click on, and what they, and what they retweet, and what they share. Ben, I mean, I know you have things to say about this too.
No, I don't have a lot to add to that. I mean, I have two totally warring instincts on this subject, which is that I'm a total hardliner about Me Too stuff as long as it's true, which are actually, that actually frames the problem. And I am aware of situations where it has not been true. And I'm aware of situations in which it has been not merely true, but understated. And I'm very moved by your story, because I do think that people are sometimes, in their righteous and correct zeal to modify people's behavior and to create very strong negative incentive structures for bad behavior, people can be way too quick to assume allegations to be true. And I mean, I got wrapped up in a situation like this a year and a half ago because I happened to be a longtime friend of Brett Kavanaugh's, and had been an admirer of his professionally, and had published him a number of times, or one major essay, I suppose, and have been very fond of him personally, and was completely, I mean, I wouldn't say enthusiastic about his nomination, because he and I have very different attitudes about a number of things, but was defensive of him on a lot of things. And then when Christine Blasey Ford became public, I was, I think, the only one of his, immediate sort of social acquaintance to say, I believe her, and his reaction to this actually changes my view of the nomination. But I was really aware, as I was writing those pieces, that what if I'm wrong? What if she's not telling the truth? What if, because I had defended him in public, I didn't feel like I had the luxury of sitting it out and not talking about it and not being part of that conversation. But I was really acutely conscious of, I don't have any ultimate way to evaluate this, to know that I'm right, know that I'm judging somebody in a fair fashion, much less somebody who I've known for 20 years and actually care about.
But that's kind of, I think, almost the point, which is like, if you could know someone that well and still not know, and have an inclination towards something, like, how little do these mobs know as they're leveling this massive amount of justice? And it's not, and their opinions in these small ways, like, they have this devastating effect on people's lives. I'm just kind of, I think that, like, the thing to take away is that, like, we used to have trials about these things, if we did, and that was one of the problems. We didn't maybe have them enough, or like whatever else, or like the evidence never came to light. Right, exactly. And like, now it's kind of, now it all plays out in public opinion, and there's no room for nuance until it's 2 years later and Eric can tell his story because things have calmed down enough and people are not like kind of like caught up in like the fervor of it all. Or they are people like you, Ben, who have like run an entire online publication that has the time and space to have a contemplative conversation about it. And so I think that there's just like, there has to be something, we have to do something about what fills that gap, I guess, is a little bit what I'm saying.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So Eric, when you heard about Tara Reade and Joe Biden, is your initial reaction following your experience, I don't want to be crude about it, but I don't buy the believe women stuff. I hold out roughly reasonable probability that this is true and that it's not true? Is it my situation was exceptional? She gets a presumption of belief, or is it just hold back and wait and see what happens? What's your kind of instinctive reaction to an allegation like that now?
I can only reflect with my own experiences. I mean, for me, believe women movement is, I mean, it's not literal believe. It's, of course, take seriously, and I think if we're talking about equality between men and women, when a woman comes with claims, her claims should be, stand to some scrutiny, or be able to stand to some scrutiny. It's not for me to judge. That's my personal opinion. And even if I do have an opinion, it's not because of course I'm just a potter. But I wouldn't feel comfortable. I've never felt comfortable facing my opinions about anything that I've read on social media. Because that, I mean, this is different. This is not necessarily a private matter, because this is about, you know, somebody running for president. But I think that everything needs to be I don't know, the due justice kind of everything needs to due process, exactly, due process, and kind of run its course through. And again,
I love that you say just
you're asking a potter something pretty.
Yeah, I know that was like but there, I do love that you say, like, just for what it's worth, there was an article today, my friend Jill Filipovic wrote, who's writes frequently for the New York Times, and she writes a bunch of books, and she just wrote an article about how the believe all women is this fake meme that the right has started in order to kind of like take over this idea. And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, and she kind of said something similar. She's a huge feminist, but you hit the nail on the head, which is like, it's not literal believe. It's just take seriously. It's about care about, in the same way that like Black Lives Matter was about like, not like other lives don't matter. It was about like, take seriously the fact that like, there are a lot of people of color who are getting killed by police. And so there's like, I don't know, I don't want to get into too heavy a discussion, but I think that kind of what you say is exactly right. And it's, I just think it's important that you've kind of come so far in the last 2 years. Your studio, I think, is better than ever. Like, and I followed you pretty closely on social media just because I've always been a fan. And then, you know, and so like what it's worth, I do think that there has that, like, you know, everything that you've accomplished is kind of pretty amazing, and maybe this will end up being part of your story that really, you know, not only defines your art.
I just want to add one thing. Now my business has been affected, and you know, some commercial partnerships I've had in the past have, you know, poof, disappeared. Certain articles, people have pulled out of articles, ambassadorships, these kinds of things. But I realize that these are people that are just, you know, frightened of, you know, what if the mob comes after them? I've had to kind of come to terms with that. But the only reason that my business has, and maybe this is like a silver lining on all of this, so we've had the success, is that people, we're talking about my followers, and these are 95% women. My followers are mostly women, are pretty savvy, and they can see, they were able to see through this, and a lot of them have stuck their neck out for me. And I don't know if it would have been the same case 4 years ago. But I mean, if people looking, you know, at my story can at least take from it that people have started to change their way of thinking. Yes, maybe corporations, or NGOs, whoever is afraid of working with people that possibly has, you know, has a blemish on their reputation. But normal people are ready to move forward and to support people that have experienced this.
Yeah.
And with everything starts with people, and often works its way up. And in the beginning, I was, you know, I was a little bit timid, you know, talking about this. And as I started to open up, and each time I travel around and talk to my workshops or at meetings, people really want to talk about this. It's I think a lot of people are looking for a much more nuanced discussion about these gender dynamics. And of course, I live in Europe, or I live in Denmark, where it's a very feministic country. But Danes did not react to this story at all. The Danes have just supported me. And so a lot of this has been going on in the US. And of course, I had to do a lot of, you know, searching. Why is this happening? Of course, not that I don't want to, Kavanaugh comes up again, but the week that he was going through these proceedings, things in the US got pretty nasty towards me, because people were, I don't know if they were, needed some release and they thought it was maybe a way of getting rid of some frustration. But a lot of this has been going on in the US. In Europe, I haven't faced this. So I don't know if that maybe tells you something.
Really interesting.
No, I think that's fascinating. I don't know. I think that, yeah. We have to, oh my gosh, it's like 5 o'clock already. We have to close, but Eric, can you tell us anything about like the vessel that you just made, which is just amazing?
It's not the most ambitious vessel ever.
It's amazing.
But it gives you an idea of, the flow of the clay and, and just the appearance of, working on, with the throwing, but it has a good balance. It will hold one flower. Not the most functional thing, but I hope you guys have enjoyed watching me make it. And for those of you that have seen this and you think, wow, that's pretty mesmerizing, and it's pretty calm to do yourself, I think you should definitely try it. Yeah. Because the making for me is the biggest reward of my profession, because every day I sit at the wheel, I sit at my therapy, and pottery has always filled different roles in my life. In the beginning, it was, I was a kid that just needed to do something because I couldn't play soccer because I hurt my ankle. And then later on, it was because I want to make this into a profession. Last 2 years ago, I used this to ground myself and to find meaning with my life. So pottery is extremely amazing craft, not just, watching me do it, but I hope you guys try it yourselves.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us.
Eric,
thank you for having me.
Fun. Yeah, this is great.
This is some heavy topics for a potter, but hopefully you've got some meaning from it.
Well, you handled them nimbly. Thank you so much for coming on.
And for those of the audience who don't follow you, what is your Instagram handle?
@Tortus, TORTUS.
All right. Tomorrow we will have the filmmaker Whit Stillman. We'll be back at our usual time, 5 o'clock. Who is going to do our sign-off? I finger Kevin R. Kevin R., the sign-off is yours.
Well, I think that the lesson I learned today is that I need to actually follow Ben on Twitter so that I get the update on when this show is early, because, you had a 53-day streak going.
It was a reasonable assumption that we'd be here at 5, but that's the thing. We're always on YouTube. As soon as we're done, we will be available on YouTube, and you can watch Eric throw this entire thing, this vessel. But, we couldn't ask him to start a show at 11 o'clock p.m.
Yeah, thank you guys for moving the time for me. That's amazing.
No, it's really, thank you for doing it.
I have kids that are getting up in about 5 hours, so I'm going to get a little bit of sleep now.
We'll let you go. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
So, Kate, what do we say until tomorrow?
In lieu of fun, if you can't have fun, come hang out with us. Bye. Bye, Ben.
Yeah.
Bye,
Eric.
Bye.
We don't have fun anymore, but if you can't have fun, at least you can hang out with us. Bye, guys.